Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Zodiac Secrets in Tarot.com. In this episode of the Lady Magnate's Magic Podcast, we're diving deep into esotericism. Grab your favorite cup of antioxidants, whether it's green tea, coffee, or red wine, and join us for this insightful exploration. Exploring esotericism, from ancient wisdom to modern spirituality. Esotericism can sound like a daunting word, but at its heart it simply refers to hidden or inner knowledge, ideas and practices meant for a select group rather than the general public. In fact, the term comes from the Greek esoterikos, meaning inner. Originally, it applied to secret teachings reserved for initiates and kept hidden from the masses. Throughout history, many spiritual traditions have been considered esoteric because they operated at the fringes of mainstream religion, imparting special teachings to a small circle of seekers. In this blog post, we'll take a friendly journey through the world of esotericism, from its historical roots in movements like Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Alchemy, and Gnosticism, to its core ideas about inner transformation and symbolic language. And even how these secret traditions pop up in today's spiritual practices and popular culture. By the end, you'll see that while esoteric teachings were once hidden away in dusty manuscripts and mystery schools, their influence is alive and well in the modern world, often in places you'd least expect. What does esoteric mean, and why is it secret? At its most basic, to call something esoteric means it's intended for an inner circle of knowledgeable people, not for mass public consumption. Many esoteric groups throughout history were secretive on purpose, not necessarily to be elitist, but because their teachings were easily misunderstood or even seen as heretical by orthodox authorities. In Western culture, scholars use esotericism as an umbrella term for a range of traditions that have shared an outsider status and a focus on hidden wisdom. These include ancient and medieval movements like Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Alchemy, astrology, ceremonial magic, and later movements like Theosophy, Spiritualism, Wicca, and the New Age movement. What unites all these diverse paths? They all claim there's more to reality than meets the eye. Instead of taking religious myths or scientific facts at face value, esoteric teachings look for deeper symbolic meanings and direct personal insight into spiritual truth. Often they posit that true wisdom has been passed down through the ages in secret, awaiting those who are prepared to receive it. Historically, this meant joining an initiatory order or studying with a master who would slowly unveil knowledge to you. Think of a guru teaching a disciple, or a secret society with different degrees of initiation. For example, medieval alchemy texts disguised spiritual lessons in the language of chemical experiments, so only insiders in the know could decode them. Likewise, Kabbalistic lore in Judaism was traditionally taught only to mature scholars, given its complex and powerful nature. It's important to note that esotericism isn't a single doctrine or belief system. It's more like a category of thought, a mystery tradition, that can show up inside many different religions and philosophies. Western esotericism, in particular, developed as a stream of thought apart from both the church and the rationalist scientific establishment. As one scholar put it, it often consists of rejected knowledge, ideas not accepted by mainstream religion or science. Instead of public ceremonies or dogmas, esoteric teachings often happen in private letters, obscure manuscripts, secret rituals, or symbolic art. So, to summarize, esotericism is about inner spiritual knowledge, the kind that you might have to dig for or be initiated into, rather than what you'd hear in a typical sermon. Now, let's dig into a few of the major esoteric traditions that have transmitted this hidden wisdom through history. Key esoteric traditions through history. Esoteric ideas have surfaced in various cultures and eras. Here we'll introduce 4 of the most influential Western esoteric traditions: Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Alchemy, and Gnosticism, each with its own flavor and historical context. These are by no means the only esoteric paths, but they're key pillars that have inspired many others, like Rosicrucianism, Theosophy, Freemasonry, and more. Understanding these gives a good foundation for what esotericism is all about. Hermeticism, wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus. Hermeticism is a mystical philosophy attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary figure said to be a fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. In fact, Trismegistus means thrice great Hermes, indicating his supreme wisdom. The Hermetic texts, collectively called the Hermetica, were written in the early centuries AD and present dialogues in which Hermes imparts spiritual knowledge about the nature of the universe, the mind, and God. Renaissance scholars revered these texts, believing they contained ancient Egyptian secrets of the cosmos, though we now know the Hermetica were composed a bit later, in Hellenistic times. One of the most famous Hermetic sayings is "as above, so below." This phrase comes from the Emerald Tablet, a short cryptic text attributed to Hermes. It expresses the idea that the earthly realm, microcosm, is a reflection of the heavenly realm, macrocosm, that the patterns we see in the stars, for example, are echoed in our own lives. In full, the tablet states, "That which is above is like to that which is below, and that which is below is like to that which is above." This concept of correspondences, hidden connections between the human world and the cosmos, is a cornerstone of esoteric thinking. Hermetic philosophers taught that by understanding those correspondences, a person could work with nature's hidden forces. Another hallmark of Hermeticism is its universal spirituality. Hermetic texts describe a single, transcendent God, or the All, but they are not tied to one religion. This made Hermeticism attractive to thinkers who wanted a more personal, experiential spirituality outside of Orthodox Christianity. Renaissance mages like Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno, for instance, drew on Hermetic and Neoplatonic ideas to propose that divine truth could be found in all traditions if one understood the symbols correctly. In summary, Hermeticism gave Western esotericism the idea of a hidden, universal wisdom behind all existence. It's also responsible for a lot of the mystical language you'll encounter, like the idea that the material world mirrors the spiritual world. The figure of Hermes Trismegistus himself was revered as a great sage or even a patron saint of occultists. Alchemists, astrologers, and magicians through the centuries often invoked Hermes for inspiration. His name is where the term hermetically sealed comes from, hinting at the secrecy of his knowledge. And indeed, Hermetic principles like "as above, so below" have had a long life. They were picked up by medieval alchemists, 19th century occultists, and even New Age authors in the 20th century. Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and the Tree of Life. Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, offers another rich vein of esoteric thought. The word Kabbalah literally means received or tradition in Hebrew, and it refers to a body of secret teachings that delve into the nature of God, creation, and the soul. Kabbalah emerged in medieval times, around the 12th to 13th centuries, as a hidden interpretation of Judaism, one that was often only taught to learned rabbis. It's described as an esoteric school of thought in Jewish mysticism, forming the foundation of mystical religious interpretations within Judaism. Instead of focusing on the outward laws and rituals, Kabbalists sought the inner meaning of scriptures. One of the key symbols of Kabbalah is the Tree of Life diagram, as shown above. This diagram is a kind of mystical map of reality. It consists of 10 spheres, called Sephirot, connected by 22 paths. Each Sephira represents an aspect of the divine, like compassion, wisdom, strength, etc., and also a level of creation, from the most exalted spiritual essence, Keter, the crown, down to the material world, Maketh, the kingdom. By studying the Tree of Life, Kabbalists believe one can understand how the universe emerged from the infinite divine source and how everything is interrelated. It's a bit like a spiritual flowchart. Moving through the Sephirot is also a journey of inner development, reconciling paradoxes and reuniting with God. Kabbalah introduced many influential esoteric concepts. For example, the idea of emanations, that creation unfolds from God in a series of emanating energies or attributes, the Sephirot, which gives a dynamic, almost psychological portrait of divinity. Kabbalists also interpret the Hebrew scriptures in symbolic and numerological ways, a practice known as gematria, believing every letter and number hides secrets. The 13th century text Zohar, a foundational Kabbalistic work, reads like a mystical commentary on the Torah, full of hidden meanings and metaphors. Though Kabbalah was once highly secretive, legend says you had to be 40 years old and well-versed in Torah before you could even study it. It eventually spilled out beyond its Jewish origins. During the Renaissance, Christian scholars like Pico della Mirandola became fascinated by Kabbalah, creating Christian Kabbalah as they tried to merge it with Hermeticism and Christianity. In the 19th and 20th centuries, occultists, such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in England, adopted Kabbalistic diagrams like the Tree of Life as part of their symbolic system, mapping tarot cards, astrology, and more onto it. In modern times, Kabbalah has even gone somewhat pop culture. You may recall seeing celebrities in the early 2000s, Madonna, for example, wearing a red string bracelet, a trend stemming from a Hollywood-favored Kabbalah center. Suddenly, this arcane Jewish mysticism was making headlines. A list of A-list celebrities from Elizabeth Taylor to Britney Spears became associated with Kabbalah study, bringing a lot of attention and some misunderstandings to the tradition. While the pop version of Kabbalah might be simplified, it shows how esoteric ideas can capture the modern imagination. At its core, Kabbalah remains a profound mystical path, one that sees all of creation as filled with divine light and hidden meaning, accessible through devoted study and personal transformation. Alchemy, transforming metals and the self. Alchemy is often depicted as the ancestor of chemistry, those old-timey scholars in their laboratories trying to turn lead into gold. But alchemy was much more than a proto-science. It was a deeply esoteric art. Alchemists certainly experimented with metals and potions, but they also used those processes as metaphors for spiritual growth. In Western alchemy, practiced in Europe and the Islamic world, the ultimate goal was the philosopher's stone, a substance said to transmute base metals into gold and confer immortality. On a symbolic level, the philosopher's stone represented enlightenment or perfection, turning the lead of the impure self into the gold of an awakened soul. To hide their wisdom from the uninitiated, alchemists wrote in riddles and symbols. A recipe for distilling mercury might also describe an inner meditation. They personified substances as kings and queens, dragons and phoenixes. The magnum opus, or great work of alchemy, typically involved a series of color stages: black, white, yellow, red, corresponding to stages of purification and illumination in the soul. In one sense, alchemy was about changing matter. In another, it was about changing the alchemists themselves. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, was so struck by these parallels that he studied alchemical texts extensively, believing they symbolically illustrated the process of individuation, the integration of the psyche. In modern terms, we might say alchemy is the art of transformation, whether literal or figurative. Crucially, alchemy is part of the Hermetic lineage. Medieval alchemists revered Hermes Trismegistus and often began their texts with the maxim as above, so below. They believed their chemical experiments were tied to astrological forces and divine principles. A true alchemist wasn't just a chemist, but a priest of nature, working with the life force in matter. This speaks to an idea common in esotericism that nature is alive and interconnected, sometimes called the anima mundi or world soul concept. Alchemy's influence on culture is vast. Not only did it eventually give rise to chemistry, but its imagery permeates literature and art. In the 20th century, there was a revival of interest in spiritual alchemy. The concept of personal transformation in self-help or New Age circles often borrows alchemical terms. How many times have you heard the phrase transforming your life or finding the gold within? That's alchemy at heart. In fact, the New Age movement and neo-Hermetic groups have explicitly carried forward alchemical ideas, attaching new psychological and spiritual significance to the alchemical processes. So while we no longer have people literally trying to make gold in a crucible, the essence of alchemy lives on whenever people talk about purification, rebirth, and mastering the elements of one's life. Gnosticism, secret knowledge of the early Christians. Our final stop on this historical tour is Gnosticism, one of the oldest esoteric currents in Western tradition. The Gnostics were early mystics, 2 ND, 4 RD century AD, in the milieu of emerging Christianity and other religions. The word gnosis means knowledge in Greek, not book knowledge, but a special insight or enlightenment about spiritual reality. Gnostic groups taught that salvation came through acquiring secret knowledge of the divine. In other words, one had to wake up to the truth of existence through personal mystical experience, rather than just through faith or clerical sacraments. What was this secret knowledge? Different Gnostic sects had various myths, but a common theme was radical dualism, the idea that this material world is flawed or illusory, a prison for the spirit. They often envisioned the creator of the material world as a lower deity, sometimes called the demiurge, not the true high god. According to Gnostic cosmology, a spark of the true divine light resides in human souls, but we are trapped in ignorance by the material realm. Only by gnosis, awakening to our origin in the true God beyond the physical, can we be saved. This knowledge was often said to be brought by a revealer figure. For Christian Gnostics, Jesus was not so much a savior through crucifixion, but a teacher who came to impart saving knowledge. Because these ideas deviated from orthodox Christian teachings, the Gnostics were branded heretics and their writings were suppressed. They truly were esoteric in the sense of hidden. Many Gnostic scriptures only resurfaced in 1945, when the Nag Hammadi Library of Gnostic texts was discovered in Egypt. In practice, Gnostic groups likely met privately, engaging in visionary meditation or rituals to experience spiritual realities. They had their own scriptures filled with strange imagery, eons and archons, serpents and luminous beings. A text like the Gospel of Thomas, for example, is a collection of secret sayings of Jesus that each listener must interpret to find the truth within. To a Gnostic, direct personal experience of the divine was the only way out of the world of darkness. This emphasis on inner enlightenment over external worship is a hallmark of esoteric spirituality in general. Interestingly, Gnosticism as a tendency didn't vanish with antiquity. Elements of Gnostic thought have echoed through Western esotericism ever since. The notion of a divine spark in man, the distrust of worldly authorities, the idea of cosmic hierarchies of beings, etc., show up in later occult philosophy. For instance, the Theosophists, we'll meet Helena Blavatsky soon, spoke of hidden ascended masters guiding humanity, which is a bit akin to Gnostic celestial beings. Many modern spiritual seekers, even if they've never heard the term Gnostic, resonate with the idea that truth is found within and that the ordinary world is somehow illusory or incomplete. Themes very much alive in today's mindfulness and New Age philosophies. Historian of religion J. Gordon Melton notes that followers of modern esotericism in the West, like New Agers, essentially carry forward the torch lit by ancient Gnosticism. After all, whenever someone says I'm spiritual, not religious, and seeks a personal connection to the divine, they are, in a sense, echoing the Gnostic spirit. Core ideas and themes in esoteric thought. Now that we've glanced at some key traditions, you might have noticed a lot of common threads among them. Esoteric philosophies, despite their cultural differences, often share a similar worldview and set of core concepts. Let's highlight a few of these central ideas in plain language. As above, so below, correspondence's esoteric teachings stress that there are hidden connections between the macrocosm and microcosm, between the universe at large and us as individuals. The idea that the movements of planets correspond to human tendencies, astrology, or that the structure of our soul mirrors the structure of the cosmos, as in Kabbalah's Tree of Life, are examples of this principle. In essence, everything is interrelated through symbolic echoes. This gives the world a kind of enchanted quality. Nothing is truly isolated or random. A Hermeticist sees the divine signature in every plant, every star, every number. Symbolism and hidden meaning. Esotericists love symbols, allegories, and metaphors. Instead of plain speech, they often use rich imagery to encode truths. Think of alchemical emblems, mystical diagrams, tarot cards, sacred geometry, mythic stories. These are the languages of esotericism. The idea is that some truths are ineffable, beyond simple words, so they must be conveyed through symbols that speak to the deeper mind or intuition. For example, the tarot deck is essentially a collection of symbols that map the journey of the soul. Meditating on those images can reveal insights in a nonverbal way. Rituals and magic ceremonies similarly use dramatic symbols, like incense, robes, pentagrams, etc., to engage the imagination and will. As one scholar, Antoine Favre, noted, visualization and symbolic intermediaries are key tools in esotericism. They help the practitioner access levels of reality between the material and the divine. Inner transformation. The great work almost all esoteric paths emphasize transforming the self as the true goal. It's not enough to know secret doctrines intellectually. One must undergo an inner change or awakening. This could be called spiritual alchemy, enlightenment, union with God, or finding the gnosis. The terms differ, but the concept is similar. In alchemy, the idea of transmuting lead into gold was mirrored by the alchemists transmuting their own soul. In Gnosticism, gaining saving knowledge frees one from the bondage of the physical. In Kabbalah, ascending the Tree of Life is as much an ethical and spiritual purification as it is a cosmological lesson. The end result aimed for is often described as wholeness, wisdom, and unity with the divine. Personal experience and initiation play a huge role here. Typically, an esoteric path will guide members through levels of insight. Think of mystery school initiations or degrees in Freemasonry or yogic stages that step-by-step produce a new, wiser person. This experience of transmutation, the idea that practicing esotericism fundamentally transforms one's being, is considered a defining feature. One truth, many paths. Esoteric thinkers often hold a perennial philosophy viewpoint, the idea that all religions and mystical paths share a common root of truth. They believe there is a unifying wisdom behind the exoteric forms of different faiths. For example, 19th century occultists like Blavatsky spoke of an ancient wisdom that underlies Buddhism, Hinduism, Egyptian religion, etc., and tried to reconcile them. This has been called the practice of concordance, looking for correspondences between various traditions to piece together the bigger picture. The implication is that no one religion has the exclusive truth. Each is like a piece of a puzzle. This theme makes esotericism quite inclusive in a way. A Hermeticist or Theosophist is happy to borrow and mix elements from many sources, Hermetic texts, Kabbalah, Eastern scriptures, folklore, in the quest for wisdom. It's why, for instance, a modern esoteric order might have Christian imagery alongside Egyptian gods and Hebrew names of God. All are seen as reflections of the one truth. Secrecy and initiation. By their nature, esoteric traditions have often been organized as closed groups or secret schools. The knowledge was thought to have potency that required moral and spiritual readiness to handle. Thus, systems of initiation developed. A newcomer might start as a neophyte, learn basic symbolism, prove their dedication, and only then be shown the next layer of teachings. This way, knowledge is transmitted from master to student in a controlled manner. For example, in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a 19th century magical order, members advanced through grades named after elements and Sephiroth, each grade revealing new ciphers and techniques. The idea of lineage is key. You learn from someone who learned from someone, tracing back to an enlightened source. Even when physical groups aren't involved, esotericists often speak of initiation in a metaphoric sense. One might be initiated by visionary experience or inner guidance. The flip side of the secrecy is that outsiders often suspect esoteric groups of all sorts of wild things, from heresy in the old days to conspiracy theories in modern times. But usually, the secrecy was simply a way to create a sacred space for learning and perhaps to avoid persecution. In short, esotericism invites individuals to see the world as layered with meaning and to embark on a journey of inner discovery. It's a very experiential approach to spirituality. You don't just believe, you seek to know and become the truth through personal effort. It also tends to be optimistic in a sense, assuming that anyone sincerely willing to study and practice can, with time, unlock profound wisdom. Whether through meditation, ritual, study, or meditation, the esoteric path is about uncovering what's hidden, both in the universe and in ourselves. From Hermes to Crowley, influential figures in esotericism. History is full of colorful characters who have championed esoteric ideas. Let's meet a few famous and infamous figures who have had a major impact on esoteric traditions, shaping how those ideas spread into the modern world. Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary sage. It might seem odd to start our who's who with a possibly mythical figure, but Hermes Trismegistus deserves the spot. As mentioned earlier, Hermes Trismegistus is described as a legendary Hellenistic figure, essentially a blend of the Greek messenger god Hermes and the Egyptian god of wisdom Thoth. In lore, he's the ultimate sage, a priest king who knew the secrets of the cosmos. The Hermetic corpus, a set of mystical dialogues, and the Emerald Tablet are attributed to him. For centuries, European alchemists and magicians truly believed Hermes Trismegistus was an actual ancient prophet who predated Moses. This gave enormous authority to any writings under his name. Hermes Trismegistus is credited with founding Hermeticism, hence the name. He was said to have taught about the one divine mind, the power of the word, logos, and the path of spiritual rebirth. Renaissance humanists saw him as a wise pagan saint who could sit alongside biblical figures. Even though modern historians view Hermes as a symbolic or composite figure, his influence is very real. The Hermetic tradition that inspired Renaissance magic, Rosicrucian manifestos, and later occult revivalists all stems from the writings ascribed to Hermes Trismegistus. Key ideas linked to Hermes include the aforementioned as above, so below, and the concept of Prisca Theologia, the notion that there was a pristine ancient theology, revealed to great wise men like Hermes, that contains the core of all wisdom. Many esotericists through time have aspired to recover this primordial wisdom. In art and iconography, Hermes Trismegistus is often depicted as an old man with a tablet or a book. Some Masonic lodges even celebrated Hermes in their rituals, viewing him as a patron of the occult sciences. In short, Hermes Trismegistus, whether as a historical ghost or a symbolic hero, has been the face of Western esotericism's oldest lineage. People from medieval alchemists to modern New Age authors have quoted his words. For example, the New Age popularization of the Hermetic principles through a 1908 book, The Kybalion, published under Hermes' name, kept his legacy alive, teaching principles like mentalism and rhythm as keys to understanding reality. So if you ever come across sayings like the all is mind or as within, so without, tip your hat to good old Hermes Trismegistus. Helena Blavatsky, the mystic who brought East to West. Jumping to the 19th century, one cannot overstate the impact of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky on modern esotericism. Madame Blavatsky, 1831 to 1891, was a Russian noblewoman turned mystic who co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. If Hermes was about ancient wisdom, Blavatsky was about synthesizing ancient wisdom for a new age. She traveled widely, accounts vary on how much is embellished, and claimed to have studied with hidden adepts in places like Tibet and India. Her mission, as she saw it, was to reveal a portion of the secret knowledge that could unite science, religion, and philosophy. Blavatsky's major works, Isis Unveiled, 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, 1888, are huge compendiums of esoteric lore. In them, she asserts that theosophy, meaning divine wisdom, is nothing less than the synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy, reviving an ancient wisdom that underlies all the world's religions. She drew upon Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Kabbalah, and more, weaving a grand narrative of spiritual evolution. For example, Blavatsky taught about root races, stages of human and planetary evolution, karma and reincarnation, borrowed from East, and the existence of ascended masters or Mahatmas, advanced spiritual beings who quietly guide humanity. She even announced the coming of a new age of higher consciousness. Yes, Blavatsky was one of the first to use that term in a spiritual context. Blavatsky was a charismatic but controversial figure. Fans saw her as an enlightened sage reviving occult knowledge. Critics saw her as a fraud. She was accused of producing fake paranormal phenomena to wow supporters. Regardless, her influence is immense. Her ideas influenced the spread of Hindu and Buddhist ideas in the West and helped spur Western esoteric currents that followed, including the New Age movement itself. She basically opened the door for Eastern spirituality to flow into Western esoteric thought. Thanks to theosophy's popularity, concepts like reincarnation, karma, chakras, meditation, and yoga became familiar to Western audiences beyond academia or missionary reports. Moreover, theosophy gave birth to offshoots. Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy and various occult fraternities were inspired by Blavatsky. Even later figures like Alice Bailey, who coined the term New Age in the 1920s, built on Blavatsky's foundation. If you've ever visited a New Age bookstore, you've seen Blavatsky's legacy, shelves of books on metaphysics, blending Western occult symbols with Eastern wisdom and modern science fiction-like cosmologies. In a sense, she is the mother of New Age spirituality. Blavatsky's life story is fascinating, involving world travel, seances, scandal, etc. But for our purposes, remember her as the bridge builder. She connected the occult traditions of the West with the mysticism of the East, and packaged it in a way that set the stage for 20th century spiritual movements. Through her Theosophical Society, which still exists in various forms, she trained others who carried esoteric ideas into the public eye around the globe. The Society's motto, "There is no religion higher than truth," captures that esoteric spirit of seeking the universal wisdom beyond any one creed. Aleister Crowley, the rebel occultist. No tour of esoteric figures would be complete without Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947, perhaps the most notorious occultist of all time. Crowley was an English magician, writer, and adventurer who fancied himself the prophet of a new spiritual era. He's a complex character, brilliant in some ways, self-indulgent and shocking in others. The British press in his day dubbed him the wickedest man in the world for his flamboyant lifestyle and ritual practices, which scandalized polite society. Crowley himself gleefully adopted dark nicknames like the Beast 666, playing up his image as a contrarian. But behind the theatrics, Crowley was deeply involved in esoteric pursuits and made a lasting mark on them. As a young man, Crowley joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where he learned ceremonial magic, rituals, Kabbalah, astrology, etc., under notable teachers like S.L. MacGregor Mathers. A falling out led him to pursue his own path. In 1904, while in Cairo, Crowley claimed to receive a channeled text called the Book of the Law, dictated by a spiritual being named Aiwass. This book became the cornerstone of Thelema, the new religious philosophy Crowley founded. The core message of Thelema is encapsulated in the famous line, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Love is the law, love under will. Crowley interpreted this not as a license for anarchy, but as the imperative for each person to discover their true will, their authentic divine purpose, and follow that above all. In Thelema, 1904 marked the dawn of the Aeon of Horus, a new age of spiritual liberty, in Crowley's framing, replacing the dying age of Osiris/old religions. Crowley spent his life writing dozens of occult books and manuals on magic, yoga, and philosophy. He synthesized Eastern practices, yoga, meditation, with Western ritual magic and Kabbalah, much like a one-man esoteric laboratory. He led a bohemian, wandering life, organizing magical orders, like the A Therefore, and later leading the Ordo Templi Orientis in Britain, climbing mountains, and seeking spiritual highs, sometimes aided by ample drug use. His libertine attitudes towards sex and drugs were part of his spiritual expression. Sexual magic was one of his interests, but also made him a target for societal backlash. Why is Crowley so influential? For one, he revitalized and demystified the practice of magic for the 20th century. He removed some of the Victorian stuffiness and made it more experimental. He also produced works like Magic in Theory and Practice and the Book of Thoth on Tarot, that became handbooks for later occultists. Furthermore, Crowley's whole persona, the magician as a rule-breaker seeking freedom and higher consciousness, hugely influenced the 1960s counterculture and beyond. The hippie era's interest in alternative spirituality, free love, and consciousness expansion found a precursor in Crowley. Rock musicians name-dropped him. For example, the Beatles put him on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page was a fan who even bought Crowley's old mansion. In the realm of pop culture, Crowley is a perennial figure, appearing in novels, comic books, and inspired characters in movies. Many modern Wiccans and magicians, even if they don't agree with all his ideas, owe a debt to Crowley for blazing a trail and leaving behind a rich library of occult knowledge. As one historian put it, Crowley has remained a highly influential figure over Western esotericism, even long after his death. In summary, Aleister Crowley was a provocateur mystic who declared a new era of personal spiritual sovereignty. He pushed the boundaries of Western esoteric practice and made it accessible and interesting to a new generation. Love him or hate him, his stamp on contemporary occultism is indelible, from the Thelemic motto, "Do what thou wilt," becoming a countercultural anthem, to the continued study of his magical techniques in today's esoteric schools. Of course, there are many other notable figures we could discuss, from Paracelsus the Renaissance alchemist, to John Dee the Elizabethan magus, to Dion Fortune the psychic of the 1940s, but we'll save those for another day. Esotericism in today's spiritual practices and pop culture. You might be thinking, all this talk of hidden teachings and mystery schools is fascinating, but what does it have to do with today? The surprising truth is that esotericism is all around us in modern culture, though it often wears a different costume. Many practices and ideas that are popular now in the wellness or spiritual scene have roots in the esoteric traditions we discussed. And the entertainment industry has wholeheartedly embraced esoteric imagery to add depth and intrigue to stories. In modern spiritual practices, the influence of esotericism is most obvious in the broad New Age movement and related alternative spirituality trends. Starting in the 1970s and 80s, the New Age movement repackaged a lot of older mystical ideas for a contemporary audience seeking personal growth. Its followers were essentially modern esotericists, emphasizing mystical knowledge and direct experience. Do you enjoy yoga or meditation for more than just exercise? That reflects the theosophical and Eastern mystical import by a people like Blavatsky, who made such practices popular in the West. Do you check your astrology horoscope or know someone who wears a crystal for its energy? These were once considered occult or esoteric interests, but are now mainstream hobbies. Astrology and crystal healing boomed alongside the New Age wave, harking back to ancient stargazing and stone lore. Practices like Reiki healing, chakra alignment, and tarot reading were niche occult arts a century ago. Now they're available in neighborhood metaphysical shops or yoga studios. The very New Age notion of an impending global shift in consciousness, the Age of Aquarius, is basically an esoteric prophecy derived from theosophy and astrology. Even the rise of interest in witchcraft and Wicca in recent decades is part of this continuum. Wicca, a modern pagan religion, was influenced by ceremonial magic orders and folk esoterica. And today many young people proudly call themselves witches while sharing spellcraft tips on TikTok. What was once secret lore of covens is now a hashtag. In a sense, the occult has gone open source. Another example, the holistic health movement, which treats the person as body, mind, spirit, has roots in esoteric philosophies that see the unity between the physical and the spiritual. Concepts like auras, energy bodies, or the power of positive thought, New Thought movement, all spring from esoteric soil. The idea that by changing your consciousness you can affect reality is straight out of Hermetic magic. Crowley defined magic as causing change in conformity with will. Now it's taught in self-help seminars as the law of attraction. In popular culture, esoteric themes provide endless inspiration for novels, movies, and TV. Storytellers know that the mystery of hidden knowledge or secret societies makes for a gripping plot. Consider Dan Brown's bestseller, The Da Vinci Code. It popularized the idea of a secret bloodline of Jesus and esoteric clues hidden in art. A very Gnostic-style revision of Christian history that had millions of readers buzzing about the Holy Grail and Mary Magdalene. Countless fantasy and supernatural shows borrow imagery from real occult lore. Pentagrams, grimoires, incantations in Latin, demons and angels battling. These are staples of entertainment now. For instance, the TV series Buffy the Vampire Slayer featured a teenage witch and occult bookstores as part of its universe. The DC/Vertigo comic series Hellblazer and the film Constantine center on a magus fighting supernatural forces. The recent popularity of shows like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or American Horror Story Coven also highlights modern fascination with witchcraft. On a deeper level, some creators weave genuine esoteric philosophy into their stories. Philip Pullman's acclaimed novel series, His Dark Materials, is loaded with Gnostic and Hermetic ideas. For example, it portrays a multiverse with Republic of Heaven versus the Authority, a not-so-subtle take on Gnostic rebellion against an false god. And even features a truth-telling device called an alethiometer that's essentially a symbolic divination tool akin to tarot or I Ching. The movie The Matrix struck a chord with its gnosis-like premise that the world is an illusion and one hero can wake up and see the truth. A classic esoteric allegory dressed up as cyberpunk action. The Star Wars saga introduced generations to the idea of the Force, a mystical energy field connecting all life, which strongly resembles concepts in Hermetic and Eastern mysticism about a living universe and chi or prana energy. Moreover, real historical esoteric figures often pop up in fiction. You'll find portrayals of Nicholas Flamel, a real 14th century alchemist rumored to have found the Philosopher's Stone, in everything from Harry Potter to Marvel Comics. Hermes Trismegistus sometimes cameos as a character in fantasy literature. Aleister Crowley himself shows up as a character or inspiration in various media. The TV show Supernatural had a demon named Crowley, for example. Bands and musicians have also been drawn to esoteric symbolism, from Led Zeppelin's use of occult symbols on an album cover to pop artists flirting with tarot and Kabbalah imagery in music videos. In fact, scholars note that contemporary esotericism is deeply intertwined with popular culture and new media. The internet has allowed previously secret or obscure teachings to proliferate widely. You can now find online courses on Kabbalah, discussion forums for alchemy enthusiasts, or YouTube channels decoding symbols in movies. While in the past one might have to seek an apprenticeship in a distant lodge to learn these arts, now a quick search can start you on the path, albeit without the guidance that traditional initiation provided. This democratization has a funny effect. On one hand, it breaks down the old secrecy. On the other, it means elements of esotericism can be remixed in pop culture in superficial ways. For instance, a heavy metal band might use occult imagery for shock value without genuinely practicing magic. It can be hard to tell who is a serious occultist versus who is using the aesthetic. But either way, esoteric symbols have become part of the visual and narrative language of our culture. To give a concrete illustration, the symbol of the tarot deck, once hidden in the parlors of secret societies, is now everywhere. In movies, in fashion, on Instagram. A tarot card like the Magician, which, recall, embodies the as above, so below concept, is recognizable enough that it can be used in a film montage to wordlessly suggest someone is delving into occult power. In a way, we've all become a bit esoteric by osmosis as these themes circulate around us. Conclusion: the enduring allure of the esoteric. From the ancient wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus to the modern mystique of the New Age, esotericism has shown a remarkable ability to adapt and survive. Its form changes with each era, but its essence, the search for hidden truth and personal transformation, remains. What was once taught in secret temples is now discussed in podcasts or depicted in blockbuster films. Yet the heart of esotericism still beats in the quiet study of a dedicated individual poring over a cryptic text, or in the moment of insight during meditation when a symbol suddenly clicks for a seeker. Why does esotericism endure? Perhaps because it speaks to something deeply human, the feeling that there is more to life than the obvious. We are symbol-making, meaning-seeking creatures. The esoteric approach invites us to see ourselves as participants in a grand cosmic drama, with correspondences linking even our smallest actions to the stars above. It assures us that knowledge is vast and wondrous, and that by looking inward and outward with equal measure, we can find our connection to the divine source of it all. In a world that can often feel disenchanted or materialistic, esoteric traditions infuse a sense of mystery and possibility. Importantly, you don't have to join a secret order or learn archaic languages to appreciate esotericism. Its insights are woven into the fabric of many modern spiritual practices. When you balance your mind and body in yoga, when you consult your dreams for guidance, when you notice synchronicity, meaningful coincidences in your life, you are touching the esoteric notion that life is brimming with deeper significance. Even engaging with fiction that has occult themes can spark questions about reality and encourage you to seek your own answers. The tone of esotericism today is increasingly welcoming and inclusive. Many contemporary teachers aim to demystify these once secret teachings, making them accessible without losing their magic. Whether one approaches esoteric ideas as literal truths, psychological metaphors, or simply fascinating historical artifacts, there is value in them. They encourage us to cultivate intuition, to think in symbols, to see unity in diversity, and to continually learn and transform. In closing, The world of esotericism is like a vast library of wisdom waiting for those curious enough to enter. It's a realm where philosophy meets poetry, where science meets myth, and where the inner and outer worlds unite. So the next time you hear of an arcane concept or spot a mystical symbol, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. You might just find that behind the exotic terminology is a relatable insight for your own life's journey. After all, as the esoteric traditions have long implied, when the student is ready, the teacher or teaching appears. And in our age, those teachings are all around us. They're once guarded secrets hiding in plain sight, ready to inspire a new generation of seekers. We truly hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyed listening. Share this with your friends and family so they can begin their transformation too. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, give this video a thumbs up and we'll be in contact. If you're really interested in esotericism, then check out our courses and ebook. Thank you for watching. We wish you ocean of abundance, great health, huge wealth, and true love.